Shalom Aleichem. Peace unto you, Sister Helen Prejean. It is an abundant honor to sit with you on behalf of our group, L'chaim, Jews Against the Death Penalty, thousands of us from around the world, and on behalf of even more Jews around the world to be here with you. I think you really don't need any introduction. Author of Dead Man Walking, the spirit and the personification of death penalty abolition in the United States and in many ways across the world. I've read three of your books. I've read The Killing of Innocence. I've read Dead Man Walking, of course, and I've read River of Fire: My Spiritual Journey. I know you have others, but that
No,
gives
I
me.
don't. Those are my only three books. You got them all, Michael.
Oh, well, I guess
Working on my fourth
wishful
now.
thinking. I look forward to reading the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Um, So I do have some questions for you that, on behalf of our group, just in the context of multi-faith work for abolition. But I
Sure.
want to
Yeah,
start
yeah.
with a blessing for you. I think if any, there are so many folks in the Jewish world who would be want to have this opportunity to begin with a blessing for you, and I want to offer a special blessing that I gave in this very room over the phone to someone I think you knew, Mr. John Ramirez, who uh, was a pen pal of mine and was executed last year by Texas. And you advocated for him in the Supreme Court that there could be a spiritual advisor with him in the chamber. Well, 2 years ago, and a previous execution date was on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and he called me the day before, and he said, Michael, I want you to give me a special blessing. And I said, whatever you'd like, John. And he said, with his accent, he said, I want the ironic blessing.
Ironic blessing.
The ironic blessing. And I said, John, I, I'm at a loss. I don't know that one. The ironic blessing. It took us back and forth a couple minutes to realize he was saying the Aaronic blessing, the blessing of Aaron, the priestly
Oh,
benediction.
oh,
So this is in and of course the irony, this horrific synchronicity is he was not executed on Rosh Hashanah, but he was executed the following year on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. So this is with him in mind and in your honor, the oldest blessing in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the priestly benediction from the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 24 through 26. It'll take about 1 minute.
just take your time.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha. May the Lord shine his light upon you and grant you grace. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, 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 shalom. And may the Lord turn the divine face to you and grant you peace.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you for letting me get that off my chest.
No, that's beautiful. Thank
All
you. I
right.
need that. I need it. I need that, Michael. Thank you.
Well, it comes from a very deep,
Mm.
deep place and a conduit from many of us across the world. You have been holding this torch for decades, and I want to get into that now. So, the first question, you've written powerfully in the books I've mentioned about some of the pushback that you've received in the past, even from some members of the Catholic community who have supported the death penalty. Our group, L'chaim, which means to life, Jews Against the Death Penalty, and I personally have similarly encountered criticism and derision from certain corners of the Jewish community who believe in capital punishment. Often, this is the most difficult for me to take in. L'chaim as a group is only 3 years old. You've been doing this since I've been in diapers. You are exactly my father's age, and your first death row pen pal relationship was with Elmo Patrick Saunier, and that began in 1981, the year I was born. So, what advice might you have as a matriarch for this movement for how we might respond to criticism from within and move forward?
Well, the criticism comes because it's kind of written into our societal pattern that this is the norm, this is what we should do. This is what supposedly a just society does to criminals who have done these unspeakable acts, and justice demands that they be killed. So people like us that raise the question, it's going to be very natural that they are going to reject us or say, you're outside the norm and what you're doing is wrong. So, how could that not happen? Those of us that are going to stand for the inalienable, inviolable dignity of every human life, even criminals, that we would not get this criticism. I mean, how could it not happen? What's your response to that?
Yeah, well, I hear that, and I think it takes many forms. I know for me, in addition to what I mentioned from within the Jewish community, I've also received attacks that take, based on our stance against the death penalty, that are blatantly anti-Semitic and are ridiculous and unfounded and make no sense, but they come from this place of what you're saying. I think this opposition to breaking this norm, and then they use whatever they can, and so I've been targeted with that, and um, I know you as well have encountered accusations that are demonstrably false. So I guess that's my next question is how do you cope with all that? And
Wait, let's can we stay in this space a little bit? Because what gives rise to this fierce opposition? Okay. So what fuels that whole thing of believing that we can put our state in charge of deciding which among us, using the criteria of the Supreme Court of the Gregg decision, that we're going to have the wisdom to decide not only who did murders, but the worst of the worst murders? That we're going to have the wisdom to decide among all the murders done, those that are the worst of the worst. And then we're going to be able to entrust it over to a legal system where the Supreme Court also turned over to prosecutors discretionary power to choose whether or not a person will be killed. It gets into the hands of the individual person who's the prosecutor to decide to go for death. So if you have prosecutors who never want to go for death, there's no death. If you have a prosecutor that goes for death, they're going to seek these deaths. Any of the death sentences is because someone sought it. So we have basically a system set up by the court that's bound to lead to mistakes, to, unfairness, to racism. I mean, in the Deep South, where the penal system is purely the legacy out of slavery, to be a person of color and to go to trial for crime automatically, it's weighed against you, especially when the victims of murder are white, and automatically then that's a notch in the favor of, that's when you seek death. And where the death of people of color are negligible, it's like it's seldom sought. So all these things are wrong with the way that we have sought it. And so I believe support for the death penalty of people, as Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American person on the Supreme Court, said, when people say they support the death penalty, they don't really know what it is, and it comes out of ignorance. Now, politics feeds the death penalty. Okay, we have prosecutors in Louisiana that run for a higher position, bragging about how many death penalties they got. So there's a death in the culture of seeking death. for your own political benefit that's also present among us. So, our spiritual tradition, yours and mine, I turn to Jesus, who talks about, and I've always believed this, Michael, coming out of that death house after Elmer Patrick Sonia had been executed in the dark right after midnight, threw up, saying, the American people are good, but they do not see this process. And my role then was going to become clearer and clearer as I went along. But from the beginning, I said, my job is going to be a witness and to bring them close to the reality of this so their own good hearts can respond and we're going to be able to abolish this thing. What's your own response to that?
I, you reading your books, seeing the movie based upon it, and by the way, now the opera that's come out, Mazel Tov,
Oh my goodness. Oh
congratulations.
my goodness. I'm still recovering.
Okay, well, I mean, it's that's what you've done. I mean, and you've modeled it for me, and that's as a former prison chaplain myself. I was a prison chaplain in Vancouver, British Columbia. Thankfully, there was no death penalty,
Yeah, yeah,
but you know, the more that I told the stories to the congregation and the community of what these people had been through and what their journey was, the more it humanized them. And so now, with the advent of email and all this other stuff, we can communicate.
yeah,
I've been, communicating with folks, going ongoing, and make the world see how they're feeling in this process and what's going on. And that's the model that you've created. And I think that's, what you said about the American people are good.
yeah,
Amen. Amen. I believe that. And I believe if we bring this to them,
yeah.
they
I've
will.
seen it. Michael, I've seen it go into these audiences when you bring them close. They go, well, we didn't know it was like that. You know who inspired me? Was Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel, when he's stepping out of the Holocaust, saying, those of us who have witnessed this, where the rest of society is asleep,
Yeah.
don't see it. Our job is to be witness to them. Has inspired me. I've thought of him so much.
He is an icon
I
for
mean,
our movement. We carry his torch. He
my
famously said
God.
he said of the death penalty, death should never be the answer in a civilized
No,
society.
no,
And
no.
he attended the trial of Eichmann, and
Yeah.
but he was adamant that we should not
What a
become the
man.
angel of
What a
death.
man. And this was in the 80s after I began, they had the first three executions, and I was trying to get him to come to Louisiana to speak, to
Mm.
help wake up our people. And I was getting close. I was with his assistant. We were trying to set a date. And then he got the Nobel Prize. I went, that's it. Down to the whole world, which he did. I
Too
was
bad.
glad. But I mean, we came close to having him come to New Orleans. And I think
Well,
he was willing to.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
from everything I've read, he would jump at the opportunity now from Olam Haba, from the world to come. That's my
Yeah.
opinion. I can't prove it,
Yeah.
but that's my
Yes, sir.
opinion. So, well, you mentioned political and the role of politics, and just not even 2 hours ago, we came from this vigil that we had online for an execution of Michael Dwayne Zack in Florida, and this was the latest in a whole string of executions that the governor of Florida really has aligned with his quest for office, for presidential office, and so it just it keeps coming. And I guess the question related to that is, what is your advice for turning it all off at times and healing from the trauma of being in the midst of the death machine? I was not involved. I wrote messages to Michael. I didn't hear back, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
others, like next week, the next in line in the United States is a Jewish man, Jedediah Murphy. He's scheduled for execution in Texas on World Day Against the Death Penalty. I am in touch with him, have been in touch for years and regularly. And so, what advice do you have for self-care and how to manage that?
No, that's really important. See, here's the thing. Like this man I've been accompanying for 20 years on death row, Manuel Ortiz in Louisiana. He's innocent. It's
Hmm.
going on 30 years. His birthday is going to be Friday. He went in his 30s. He's now in his 60s. Um, and here's what a big part of what sustains me, Michael, is him. So it's not like when I go to death row with people, here's a good nun pouring herself out on these poor criminals, receiving her love and her mercy. Your relationship with each of the people that you've been with, they feed us, they teach us. There's a mutuality in the relationship that's so crucial. So I just want to say that's part of the energy and the love. And after Pat was executed, Millard Farmer, who was this wonderful attorney, he's in Deadman Walking. He taught me a lot about the death penalty and how it works and all. And we buried Pat. He was killed by the state. At the end, everything failed. And Millard said to me, and he was from Georgia, he had this accent, Sister Helen, the privilege of being with him and being that human face for him and for him to see his own humanness. Isn't that,
Yeah.
isn't benefit enough? You know
I,
what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
I do. I do. I'm reminded of when I was a young clergy person in Vancouver. I was called to the bedside of a young girl who was attacked randomly in the park, and just at the bedside, if she was dying, and I was there chanting and being there with the family as best I could. I was relaying that story to a chaplain, and he said, as horrific as that was, it was sacred space.
Ah,
And he reminded me of the story of Moses in front of the burning bush to take off your shoes, for where you're standing is sacred
holy,
space.
holy sacred space.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I do
We
feel that.
touch that. Yeah. And see, when you think of that, what we, I mean, I can't even say I've suffered anything. I mean, the opposition to me, it really, it's standing in the integrity of what we're doing. You know that it's right. Look at the suffering that's going on. There's torture going on of these human beings counting down their last days.
Yeah.
And we're lucky to be awake. We're graced to be awake to see it and be able to participate in a soul-sized thing, Michael, that we could be one of the people awake. We get the privilege of accompanying and being with people, you know, that everybody else says is disposable human waste. And we discover the great treasure of the human being. And then that fires us to be engaged in resisting the deaths and awakening the people. What better life could you have?
Mm.
Buying a new little house and remodeling and getting a new couch. I mean, you can get lost in trivial things in this
Yeah.
society.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. Well, you've answered my next question already. Is what drives you, and so
So with that, but the self-care thing's important. And
yeah,
for
yeah.
example, right now I'm engaged in big time duty self-care because I've been for 2 weeks in New York in the most people intensive thing I have ever done in my life, Michael. And I'm an extrovert, and that helps.
Okay.
I have never engaged with so many people. The media people, the different events. We're doing something at the Guggenheim. We're doing something at New York Public Library. And then the whole thing of the dress rehearsal where we had invited 190 people to come. It has been people intensive. I had a little room. They got me a hotel room. And that little solitary place, when the reading in Sirach just this last week in our scriptures was better to be a poor person that has a little house that gives you privacy than to be in the palace of people where you're thrown in with all these people all the time. Rough paraphrase.
Mhm, mhm.
But be able to go to the private place. And I have descended into the private place. I'm making an exception for you because you're so special, because you already won over Elizabeth and Margaret.
Well,
And this
I am
conversation,
honored.
it's part of my self-care because it feeds me to be able to have this kind of discussion with you, to share with you.
Yeah.
So self-care And relaxation, obviously the spiritual part of relaxation, the meditation. And I'll tell you one thing that happened to me in prayer up in the little hotel room when here's my name in Times Square, my picture up there in Times Square. There's my bio. There's Joyce DeDenar portraying me. Um, and I mean the adulation coming to me. People were treating this like the Met was my thanks and congratulations on all this that you're doing and all. So I'm praying. And I love the Psalms. I love the Psalms. And it's this song of a baby that has been weaned quiet on his mother's breast. Like a child weaned, we rest on the breast of God. A weaned child, weaned baby. And just the peacefulness of just be here a while. And so I just kind of explicitly said in my prayer to God, God, please protect me. Please help me to maintain humility, to know my role in all this, because they put me up in Times Square, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And then it came how to keep the perspective, how to call it humility or perspective, my place in the whole, my place in the whole. And it was the call within this is not to take all this adulation to yourself,
Right.
which really, it's very, it just doesn't stick to try to do that. But what's the call and all this energy now? How are you going to work with others to harness this energy being generated by this opera to move for the final push in this country to end the death penalty? What's your role in it? So all that's being worked out. I made the first little calls, y'all. We're going to work on the final push. And you do that in community, of course. You don't do it by yourself. Right. But that's what happened to me in New York. So self-care is partly hearing the call again about what to do next. Because it's when I don't know what to do and thrown around that's where the most anxiety comes from in me. Like, what are we going to do with this? The responsibility for it, that comes out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And other things of self-care. I live in New Orleans. I know how to cook good food. I got good friends. We play cards. We look at movies. It's just nature, being in nature. I got a bird feeder. I got beautiful flowers growing in my patio. Just natural good things. All those things.
Well, I know how to eat good food, but I'm not blessed as a cook. I'll be honest with my shortcomings. But what you said about humility particularly resonated. Yeah, I'm a cantor. I'm used to being up in front of a congregation singing. There's an element of ego there that you have to put aside. We have to do our best to put aside.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's a constant
Yeah. Oh,
beat
man.
where,
Because it's always there. It's not like you deal with it, it's gone. That little ego thing's always putting up his little head. Hey, doing pretty good here. You're at the daggone Met. I'm walking down the red carpet with Tim Robbins to go into the Met. I'm in my own box. People going, oh, Sister Helen. Really.
it's a whole other level. Yeah.
But I tell you what, but Michael, what holds me is I've seen the suffering. I've accompanied 6 people to execution. The suffering. I've witnessed the suffering. So I'm a servant of the stories, and that keeps my head straight, keeps me, my feet on the ground, because of how much they have suffered. And it's secret ritual, it's unseen. Their voice is not heard, they're disposed of, they're rendered completely passive, no agency, completely defensive. And you just see, I am in fire with that suffering. I witnessed it. I carry it. So, boy, I better keep my head straight because I'm the servant of this. If I dared to try to turn it in myself, I would just self-combust. It would be so untrue to do that. It would be so fake. It would be so, you know, I couldn't stand it. It really helps to keep me centered.
Well, you talk about the agency and the hope the lack of agency and sort of the hopelessness, the helplessness. Everything is taken away from the person. I mean, you have been in the chamber. I pray I never will have to be. I have known many people now in their last days, going, speaking with them, and to see them ripped from, any agency. What is the role you feel of a spiritual advisor? I know for some of us in chaplaincy, we talk about the prophetic voice, but to empower and to help that person who is losing all agency.
An accompaniment of being by a person's side and accompanying them on the journey is to be the face that is always saying to them, you're a child of God and you have a dignity that no one can take from you, because they are treated as so much rubbish. And so you get to be that presence. You get to be that one, at that presence with them. I mean, my man Manuel Ortiz on death row in Louisiana, going on 30 years now. I call him my Nelson Mandela.
Mm.
He truly is innocent, but he has maintained his dignity and his self-respect. I mean, he's helped maintain peace on death row tier. The wardens have turned to him to help. And he's just a great human being. I just wrote him his little birthday note saying, you were born, you came into my life, and I'm nothing but grateful for you. And that, just like you and me, when people do that for us, it shores us up inside. That agency thing, I've been thinking about that a lot recently. And Albert Camus and his reflections on the guillotine, when he says they are like a package. Move from place to place. You'll go here, you'll go there. You don't have a choice. We just changed the lethal injection. We're going to experiment with different chemicals to kill you. And I'm realizing, because the death penalty in the penal institution came right out of slavery, and who had total lack of agency over their life? The slaves. The death penalty is as close to slavery. In fact, it may be a form of it, where the person has no worth in and of themselves, not to mention agency in their life. And they're like a package. They are treated as such, as property, as something to be managed, manipulated, moved, and done whatever the state desires to do with them. Just like you could be beaten, you could be deprived of food, you could be anything as a slave. And that's a sediment of that still in the punishment, I think, of slavery. I mean, of death penalty.
Well, I fully agree. And I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in synchronicities, that things happen for a reason. And I don't think that when the United States took up lethal injection as its main form, that they did it intentionally knowing that it was first implemented by the Nazis. I hope not. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong. But
Same mentality, though.
yeah, but that's
Don't
the
you think?
fact. That's the fact, and so we sort of gloss over that. But it's there's a reason that's what that's the darkness that we're invoking and the legacy that we're continuing. So
Oh,
it just
yeah.
adds to the horror.
Nobody'd be more conscious of that than you, or even Alabama with nitrogen hypoxia. A
Absolutely.
gas,
Or
a
Arizona with
gas.
Cyclone B.
Yeah, really. But you know what I think's behind lethal injection? The desire to mask death. I mean, the easiest way, China just lines people up in the stadium and shoots them in the back of the head. And that would be a merciful death next to, I mean, they have autopsies of the lungs of people who have been lethally injected, and the lungs are filled with fluid. But the thing is, they first drug paralyzes them. So you see nothing. And you can't see what people are suffering. They can't move their lips. They can't bat their eyes. They can't yell out. And who knows what they're going through? It's to mask death. They want to try to look like it's humane. And it's that masking, it's that blinding ourselves to what we're really doing, that is behind that. We want to look like we're putting people to sleep, that we're really pretty good people. And we have to pull that curtain back. That's what I love about the opera.
Mm.
Opera Demi Walking. It's the only opera with a minute and a half of silence.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that.
yeah, and as Joseph DeRoche is hooked up to the killing machine, all you hear, Michael, is the machine. So people in the audience have their own heartbeat inside, and it's silence, a minute and a half, as we watch as his life is taken. Profound effect, bringing the audience close to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, may it pull back the curtain literally in that opera and figuratively for society.
Yeah, really.
I want to bring in one other person who was a hero to me, and that is this
Ruth
lady
Bader
here.
Ginsburg.
Yeah. I looked online and I saw that you met her a few times, and
Yeah.
she famously said, of course, if I were queen, there would be no death penalty. And so she's one of, like Elie Wiesel, she's one of the folks that we, in L'chaim, that we sort of lift up in the torch we carry.
Yeah.
Um, Given the fact that we have this next execution is of a Jewish man, I'm curious in your role, have you worked with individuals who were Jewish in on death rows or other? I know you already mentioned Elie Wiesel, people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the Jewish community. Anything that you might say about that or
Yeah. Well,
memories?
I mean, we as Catholics, as Christians, really draw on the whole Judaic tradition. I I got too busy in New York, but I love to go to synagogues to pray. I mean, that reverence for the word, you know, when you do Shabbat. I mean, that's in us, and we have, the meditation on the word and the scriptures and the. I mean, I am so fed by the stories in the Hebrew scriptures, and it's the burning bush. I did you notice the epigraph I have in River of Fire is from Saint Bonaventure? Don't ask for understanding, ask for the fire.
Oh,
And
yes, I remember
that
that.
attraction to that burning bush, and then the fire gets inside of you, that's a huge thing for me. And I love the Elijah and Elisha stories. And Elisha, when he was traveling and healed this couple that took him in and built him a little room on their roof where he had a bed, a chair, a desk. Those stories I love. And give me a doubling of your spirit. Give me your spirit. Put your cloak around me. All those prophetic stories.
Yeah.
In fact, the book I have right here
Ah,
is Heschel,
Heschel. Yeah.
because prophets were just regular people like us, and they got called. And Jeremiah got this burning in my bones. I wish I couldn't have to hear the voice. So I have never had a Jewish person who was executed, but that's why it's such a joy to talk to you, because oh,
Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned all these biblical figures, and when I think of your book, The Death of Innocence, I did my master's thesis at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York on the book of
uh,
Job, and I wrote a cantata on Job. And in the Jewish world, Job is sort of the suffering innocent par excellence.
yeah,
So when I
really,
think of people that you've walked with,
like Dovey Gillis Williams.
right, right,
Yeah, the first story, African American man with an IQ 65.
yeah,
Real rooted down that track. Oh,
hmm
I think of him as the lamb. Like Jesus is called the Lamb of God. The Lamb led the slaughtered race, not his voice against, that Stovey. See, then I mean, I don't know what your morning prayer is. My morning meditation is always to feed on the scriptures. And that's always my starting point. And I have great respect. I love my Jewish brothers and sisters, and I love what you have giving us the deep spiritual tradition for life and against death. And for probably the thing I have written and 800,000 books of Demi Walking that are out there. The thing I've written the most when I autograph a book is choose life from Deuteronomy. I
Yeah.
set before you death and life. Choose life. That
Yes.
you may live. That
Mm,
you may live.
right. Hence the name of our group, L'chaim. You talk about your affinity for Judaism, and I would want to say a word about where my affinity for Catholicism comes from. My grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. She was 99 or 101, depending on which records you asked and looked up. The reason she lived was because there was a Polish Catholic man named Mr. Michal Cegielski who gave his life so that she and her three sisters, who were hiding on his farm, would not be found out. And he was murdered because he didn't give up their location, and they got away. It took our family 80 years to locate the full identity of this man, and just 2 years ago now, he is in the Garden of the Righteous Among the Nations at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel. I wouldn't be alive, wouldn't be having this conversation with you without this Polish Catholic farmer who made the ultimate sacrifice. And it informs what I do as a multi-faith chaplain in a hospital setting, and it
Yeah.
informs what I do reaching out to people on death rows. And my question is related to that. Um, Let me just pull up one comment I had from there's a Jewish fellow in California on death row in California, and his name is Gregory Smith. And I told him I'd be talking with you today. I said, "Do you have any messages you want to send to Sister Helen?" He said, "This is from a Jewish man on San Quentin. I would say that we are one people on one planet, and we need all the people to step up and show love to one another. God wants us to love and not murder our fellow people. Peace, love, and respect."
Oh, could it be better than that? Oh, that's wonderful.
Well,
Please extend to him my love.
I will. And my thoughts for you are, how do you feel we're doing? You've been in this movement for a long time. How do you feel we're doing?
We got to stop these pockets of death. I mean, I have really come to a clear understanding of why it's broken, why it could never have worked in the first place, the way the Supreme Court set it up with the Gregg decision 76. Impossible criteria, the worst of the worst. Who knows what that means? We are in deep mystery here of, are we going to call the murder of a child the worst of the worst? The murder of a policeman, yes, but not of a fireman, not of a teacher. We can't handle death. We can't handle the decisions about death. And then it's coupled, this is a Gregg decision, with complete discretion with prosecutors to carry it out or not. 90% of the 195 wrongfully convicted people who've gotten off of death row was because of prosecutorial misconduct. They have the police report, they have the rape kit, they have the forensic evidence, and they're supposed to turn over to defense anything that points to the possible innocence, but they get into winning. They get into political winning, and then they're never held accountable. That's why it's broken from the start. Because when you come to trial, according to the criteria, in the Judaic, you had to have how many witnesses? They had to warn the murderer before. I mean, we never would have executed anybody
No,
because
no.
the criteria was so strong for life.
Yeah, the prodigious
But
safeguards. Maimonides said, "Better to acquit 1,000 guilty people than put one innocent person to death." And
absolutely.
yeah, you had to have two witnesses who told the person committing the crime, by the way, what you're about to do is a capital offense. Just making sure you know that before you carry that out.
I mean, really.
And it was, they made it impossible to carry out.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel we're doing as a multi-faith movement in this? I mean, it feels to me like that's how we're going to get to this to come out.
No, of course, it's the way we're going to get. I think we're moving. I tell you, things started out in Louisiana. If somebody was not a bona fide Christian, even Jewish people were suspect, much less a Muslim person. They were just called pagans and they couldn't get in to be spiritual advisors. And we've been making progress. I can see that. We really are. But the heart of it is the image, the litmus test of God in the death penalty is its punisher in chief. That God is, that's who God is. He's the judge and the punisher. So we're just doing what God wants us to do. And then they selectively quote from the scriptures anything that points toward that. I
Yeah.
mean, there's just huge biblical illiteracy in this country. You used to learn to read by reading the Bible, and there's just huge illiteracy about that. And making progress, but we just got to keep speaking out and helping people.
Well, I feel that there's a responsibility that the Jewish community has to,
Yeah,
because I've encountered a lot of people, certainly who are not Jewish, but also within the Jewish world who are not necessarily as educated, that will just go to the phrase ayin tachet ayin, eye for an eye, without understanding that the interpretation of that had to do with financial remuneration, and that how what you were talking about before about all by rabbinic Judaism, it is not the same as what we have in the Torah itself.
yeah, really.
Great
Uh,
mis
do I have a correct understanding of this? This is what I learned about that. Only an eye for an eye, only a tooth for a tooth. If somebody in one village hurt someone else, the whole village would come in and kill everybody.
Yeah,
Only a life to contain it. Contain it.
yeah,
What
yeah.
I learned. Is that true? Is that what it
Yes,
is?
that is how I've been taught it as well. That at the time, within the framework of the evolution or the development of ethics and morals, that was an advance because
Yeah,
otherwise
that's
it would
right.
have been excessive punishment beyond the realm. But it was
Yeah,
just instead of more than what was taken, just what was taken.
yeah.
But the rabbis made it even more harder, by putting it even less.
How
So.
did the rabbis make it harder?
Well, the interpretation of eye for an eye specifically has to do with they made it into financial determination of, it had to do with like it would be as if the value of an eye for the value of an eye.
Okay,
I don't have the text in front of me, so I don't want to misspeak, but
sure. Okay, I got it though.
certainly the all the texts that made it so hard to impossible to carry out an execution.
Yeah, right. That's the spirit. That's
That's
the spirit of
that's
life that's been there.
yeah,
And we do see progress happening, Michael. I mean, juries hand out the death penalty far less now, even in Texas. Juries are handing it out less, prosecutors are seeking it less. What we're left are these pockets in former slave states where the prosecutors are making it happen. Oklahoma, and Trump kind of set an example of this because he had the discretionary power to kill the last 6 months of office,
yeah,
designated 13 human beings to be killed. And I knew one of those young men, Brandon Bernard, he had grown up on death row at Terre Haute. He was just 19 when he went, and he had grown up. And then that Friday, the two guards came to his cell, and he said they weren't smiling, and they weren't because he had good relationships with all these guards. And they just came to his cell and they said, Brandon, you got to come with us. And so he walked with them down the tier, and there was the warden waiting in a room, and he had a white paper in front of him, and the warden announced to him that they would kill him in so many weeks.
yeah.
And he walked back to his cell, just got in his bunk, eyes wide open. Did I just hear that I'm going to be dead in 6 weeks? It's incomprehensible to have words said to you, Michael, you're going to be dead and we're going to kill you out of the blue like that. And you just look at that suffering.
It's psychological torture, and again, synchronicity, things happening for a reason. It was Brandon Bernard's co-defendant, Christopher Vialva, who was my first pen pal on death
No
row.
kidding,
And
really.
yeah, because Christopher Vialva, and I know his mother well. He was Christian, but he identified with various Jewish practices as well, and so we had that similarity. and we wrote letters back and forth, and it was those letters that I witnessed. This is psychological torture. There's no way around it. And
Yeah.
so I got to know him, and there were two other Muslim
Really? Oh,
individuals
I didn't know that.
on the. Well, see, I work full time for the federal government, and
Yeah,
so when
okay,
when
gotcha.
Trump started with the federal executions, I took it very personally that if
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
supposed to be embodying these values of the federal government, how can I allow my employer to do this? And so on my own, I reached out to them and I said, I'm sorry that we're doing this to you, and we stand against it. And so Christopher was the first one that I corresponded with. And by the way, there was an article that came out just today in the AP News about how Alan Dershowitz, who he actually called Trump about Brandon Bernard, and he tried
Really?
to convince him to stop it. And
Yeah.
Trump indicated, I can't quote it exactly, but if you look online, it's something like to the effect of, "It's too late. I already promised the family it's too late." And Dershowitz was in tears because he realized if he had called a month earlier, it might have made a difference. And by the way,
Trump,
Dershowitz
I
now
don't
is,
know.
what's that?
With Trump, I don't know. I'm
Oh,
not
you,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
But
But
anyway, so what were we going to say about Alan
well,
Dershowitz?
he's on the legal team for this fellow next week in Texas, and he's hoping to talk to Abbott. I mean, it would take a miracle, but that's what we're hoping for.
To have your life in the hands of these politicians. Oh my God. Mm.
It's awful. But I want to respect your time, and I want to end on a positive note. You had asked, you had sort of indicated what your practice was in the mornings for prayer, and one of the prayers that I personally recite every morning is it's just a part of a verse. It's from
Yeah.
Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 6, which is Azah Chamavet Ahava. Love is as strong as
I
death.
love that. I love that.
So that is
Oh,
one of my
love
meditations.
is as strong as death.
And so we have a gift for you. It'll take about 3 minutes, and I'm going to play, if with your permission, like to play this
Sure.
recording for you. Okay,
Oh,
let's see
thank
it.
you. Michael, this has been wonderful to talk to you.
Likewise. Cantor Michael Zoosman and the members of L'Chaim, Jews Against the Death Penalty. Coming to you, Sister Helen Prejean, from our sukkah on this holiday of Sukkot, the festival of booths. Sukkot Shalom, a canopy of peace. This is what you give to the world. And you also have given to the world the understanding that Azah Chamavet Ahava. Love is as strong as death. Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 6. We've written this song for you. Azah Chamavet Ahava. movet azach movet azach movet azach movet A toast to you, Sister Helen Prejean, l'chaim, to life.
That is absolutely exquisite.
Well,
Can
thank you
can
for.
I send that to we have a Elizabeth Zitron who is on our board. I mean, a close friend and who's Jewish. And could I share this with her?
Oh, it'd be my honor.
Well, because
It's
it'd be great to share it with people.
there's so much, and I know I say, on behalf of all these people, truly, I think I know so many in the Jewish world who have been inspired by you and by your work, and so this is something that, it's not just speaking for me, yes, for me, and for so many more. I hope you know that, we stand with you and we want to
Yeah.
continue standing with you however we can. And thank
Thank
you
you.
for all that you've done.
I love the fire of your awareness, in the struggle for life that we both share together. That is what I care about the most, Michael. So thank you. How
Thank
am
you.
I gonna you're gonna be in touch with Elizabeth? I'm gonna give the email address of my friend Elizabeth Zitron. Her father is the one who organized the physicians not to participate in lethal injection, you
Oh,
know, in the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And he did that. And she's great. She's wonderful. She will love this.
I would be honored to be in touch with her. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, this was so wonderful. It's very enlivening. Thank you.
All
I
right. L'chaim and to life and be well.
love it. Thank you.